Today I'm going to try to draw another church in Tbilisi, Georgia, and didn't I tell you there would be a theme? However, as opposed to yesterday, this one is not so little. While yesterday's church was tucked away in a quiet courtyard well outside the center, this one is anything but. Perched atop a cliffside overlooking Tbilisi's Old Town across the Kura River, Metekhi Church, as I think it's pronounced, stands at about 80 feet and is a popular destination for tourists and locals alike. That made things difficult, namely in terms of setting up. Save for the shadows of branches on the paper, there's not much that gives away where I'm sitting or how silly I look. It's ridiculous. If you look to the left at the reference video, you'll see that the foliage engulfs the frame, the church only peeking out here and there. And that foliage weaves its way through this garden that sits kind of beneath the church, and it doesn't leave much room for any more than a person or two, shoulder to shoulder, to walk through. There are a handful of benches, but as this is a popular area, they were all taken and by people who had no plans to leave. They were set up for a while. So when I arrived to this spot, to which I'd been during my previous visit to Tbilisi, I had a clear idea of what I wanted to draw, but no way of drawing it, which is something else I'd kind of like to talk about, maybe a bit later. Anyway, after a few minutes of circling the garden, I realized the best spot, one where the foliage wouldn't be too sparse or blot out the church entirely, was right in the middle of this pathway. However, that was from standing, which I wouldn't be doing anyway, so I squatted down and found that these pink flowers all but blocked my view. So I backed up like a duck, just waddling in reverse, until I recreated that standing perspective. That put me where I am, directly underneath a tree, conveniently out of the way, but inconveniently, well, under a tree. Every time I would go to look up at the church, my head would graze the branches above me, and even worse, with the camera behind me, my wife was set up, even deeper into the foliage. None of it was that big of a deal, but the people around me certainly got a kick out of it. And by that I mean they were confused and no doubt thought I'd lost my mind. Anyway, now that you know to what lengths I'll go for this YouTube channel, let's talk about the drawing. Like yesterday, I'm trying really hard to restrain myself from getting right into these details. There are numerous things here that caught my eye, like the arches surrounding these tall, thin windows, the texture wrapping its way around these cylindrical walls, and of course, all of the foliage that has consumed me, which honestly was the hardest thing to ignore because it was practically brushing against my cheek the whole time. But I knew that the success of yesterday's drawing hinged upon my focus, so I tried my best to emulate that once again today. So you'll notice that I've stuck to these simple shapes, working my way through the overall structure and the relationship of different planes and roofs and things. And while that makes this part of the drawing look a little childish, that's okay, because once I feel I have a clear understanding of the basics, I can move on to some of the more fun stuff that makes these drawings look like I kinda sorta know what I'm doing. And that happens right around this point. So the main structure of the church, followed by the cylindrical parts closest to me, then that flat roof on the left, and finally the primary bit, the highest point, whatever you'd call that. It's all blocked out enough for me to change the way I'm observing the scene. Up to now, I've been trying to completely lose all of the small stuff and almost like blur my vision to a point where I'm only taking in the broader silhouette. I'm not sure if this is right or whatever. Maybe there's a much easier way to approach something like this, but that's just what made sense to me at the time. Something else I'm unsure of is the relationship between the church and the foliage and what to draw first. My instinct is to actually draw the foliage first because it's in the foreground, and whatever I draw from the background, I can't draw over later on had I started in the back. But the way I did this was to observe where the foliage made contact in 2 dimensions with the church behind it, and then draw the lines of the church to about those points. I couldn't see behind the foliage anyway, so anything I drew beyond that point of contact would have been imaginary. But really, had I started with the foliage like I felt I should have, I think I would have risked spending all of my time on the tiniest of details. That's obviously an issue with time management, but also, and more importantly, it makes it hard to keep track of that meeting point that I'm talking about. So if I were to start with the flowers, moving up and down and around that part of the page, I don't have anything that clearly demarcates the foliage from the church, making it really easy to drift farther than I should, leaving insufficient space for the church, which, even though it's largely obscured, is still the primary subject here. Let me know if all that makes sense to you, or if there's a different method that would make this even more straightforward. For me, I liked having the basic shapes down first, but maybe for you, it would make more sense to maybe loosely block in everything in the scene before making any bold marks. I'd be interested to hear if you have a different method or preference, so leave a comment. While you're at it, if you haven't already, for some inconceivable reason, subscribe to the channel. We are slowly working our way up the ladder, and any bit of support is appreciated. So if you've been liking the videos, leaving a comment, or even just listening to them in the background, that's awesome. Thank you so much. Unexpectedly, I think my drawings are actually progressing at a faster rate than the channel is, which leads me into the next topic, kind of, I guess, weird tangent, which I hinted at earlier, and that is just the YouTube channel versus the drawing broadly. So I think I've mentioned this before, probably a couple of months ago, but there's this comfortable disconnection the viewer gets to experience when watching a video on YouTube, which surely extends to a reader of a book or a listener of music or pretty much anything else. And it's not until you're on the other end that you get to not just see how the sausage is made, but to flip the experience on its head, to such an extent that it's no longer that experience at all. So when I watch a movie, and let's think of a good one, The Day of the Jackal. That's one of my favorites. Not the new one, not the series with Eddie Redmayne, but the film from the 70s. If you haven't seen it and you're into that era of filmmaking, absolutely check it out. Anyway, besides the point, while watching that movie, I get the pleasure of experiencing it for what's made it on screen. Edited down from its original length with all the best takes, with the color adjusted, the score written and performed and set, with all the performances and sound and everything just dialed in. Everything that had to be practiced and perfected by all of the individuals who worked on it converged and made this thing, this one final product. And that's my sole experience of it. I can try to envision what went into making it, but ultimately the final product is what I get. But from the perspective of the DP or the actors or the colorist, whoever, it's an altogether different experience. And the end result that the audience gets is not the one felt by anyone who worked on it at a high level like that. So when I sit down to draw, I feel more like a performer in this little movie. And sometimes my acting is subpar, sometimes it's okay, but that experience is not like sitting here alone and drawing for myself. Just like an actor performing a scene is not the same as them having a conversation or something in their regular life, I guess. Similarly, an actor watching their performance is going to create a completely different movie-going experience compared to anyone else's, which is how I feel about watching myself draw. Obviously, I'm no actor, that's not the point, but it makes me wonder what experience you are having while watching this and how it contrasts to my own. When I see this frame with the split screen of the scene on one side and my drawing on the other, I see it for its parts. It's really difficult for me to separate myself from the components that went into making this, whereas I imagine you see it as one whole. It's just one thing to you, just like the movie. That separation of the parts versus the whole, or the creating versus the creation, has a strange effect on the process itself, and I wonder to what extent. So for example, had I sat down to draw this church in my free time without the camera angles and the future editing and the voiceover that I'm recording for it, I wonder, being itself the final product, how different the experience would be. I would know that it wasn't just a component of a greater creation, something that I'll never be able to appreciate in the same way a viewer would, but instead it would be to its own end, for its own sake. And sometimes I wonder how, by not doing that, I might be affecting my progress and maybe eventually even my enjoyment. To invoke the actor once again, I guess it would be like the difference between acting on stage theatrically versus acting a part in a movie being filmed. I wonder what they would say, having experienced both, what differences they felt between the two, and what conclusions they came to because of those differences. Anyway, I know that was very rambling, and the point is just, out of curiosity above all, I wonder what drawing on screen for this channel might do to my experience of drawing, since I don't think it's the same as purely just sitting down to draw. I'm sure there are pros, I'm sure there are cons to both of them, but yeah, the whole experiential part of it is really interesting to consider. So, I think I did okay. I like it better when I take a step back. I think the details look a little bit more considered a few feet away, but overall, I'm happy with it. It's not as precise as yesterday's, I don't think, but simultaneously, somehow, I think I've expanded upon yesterday. There's a lot more going on with this reference, so I'm glad I didn't get stuck or lost along the way with any of it, like I was saying. The foliage could be a lot better, but again, as it's not the primary focus, I'm okay with it being, a little wonky, a little vague. So let me know what you think about it in the comments and make sure to like and subscribe. Anyway, I appreciate you for taking the time to watch this one, and I'll see you tomorrow. Thanks.